When trying to sum up a medium, it is almost impossible. Art forms such as music, paintings, and of course movies are so vast and different that there is hardly a way to summarize besides describing literally how they are made. Each song has a BPM, each painting uses some form of paint, and each movie is shot using a camera. However, each genre, style, and tone of a film can give an audience a vastly different experience. This is the fun of going to the movies, finding a wide range of films that you can get a lot of different emotions during. But what drives them all? The story, characters, and emotions. Plots can move us, make us laugh, inspire us, excite us, scare us, and anger us, all of which help us get invested. Like good old George Lucas said.
Special effects are just a tool, a means of telling a story. People have a tendency to confuse them as an end to themselves. A special effect without a story is a pretty boring thing.
And he's right. With no emotional drive, special effects are nothing more than pretty pictures on the screen with no emotional weight to it.
So, with all that in mind, why do we love this shit? I mean, these movies are filled with the most bland characters, the most nonsensical plots, and nothing but mindless destruction. But why do we love it so much? Because it's fucking awesome, is why. Yeah, I cleared it up. Thank you. Good night. No, I'm just kidding. But really, why?
Like, yes, giant monsters punching each other and blowing shit up is super awesome. This is true. But what more do we get out of it? What do we have to justify creating such a massive fandom out of it?
Well, I'm going to answer that question today. And for those of you who might be on the fence about Godzilla, never heard of him, don't know where to start, or you just don't even like him, here is a mega fan's perspective. And this is why we are all so obsessed. So let's dive right in. This is The Appeal of Godzilla, a video essay about a guy in a costume stepping on toy buildings. Should I change that? Okay, now I know I just dissed on these movies. In a way, I called them unemotional bores. And on a critical standpoint, I stick by that. However, the special effects are nothing but impressive. For the most part,
making a movie is a collaborative process that takes so many dedicated artists and crew members. I hear a lot of people write off something as either a piece of shit or a masterpiece only looking at the acting and writing. To some, just because the script did not go the way they thought, or it really was just terrible, they write off every other bit of work on the project as if it does not matter. In the same vein, they look at a movie and call it excellent just because it has their favorite actor.
Now, there are some exceptions when a bad performance and bad script can ruin a movie, or in this case, heighten it, such as The Room, directed by Tommy Wiseau.
When you get down to it, the cinematography and production value is not that bad, simply because Tommy Wiseau has a whole lot of money and hired semi-competent people to shoot his movie. His script and directing and other performances is what makes it the spectacular shit show we see today. However, people focus a lot on the writing as a make or break point for them. It is so interesting how something can be written off as the worst thing they have ever seen just because one person or two people messed up their job.
Now, I know the writer's job is very important, don't get me wrong here, but I see filmmaking as kind of a house of cards, where there's your base ones, where if you take one out, the whole thing will fall over, and there's a couple at the top, which are still important to the entire house, but if you take it off, it won't all crumble down. Writing is definitely on that bottom layer of cards. However, there's still so many other layers to making a film that it's weird that so many people just discredit it all. For the most part, people just discredit it because they don't care. They don't care how a movie is made, what kind of integrity they take with cinematography and editing and stuff like that. And also because you're not really supposed to notice. If an editor is doing his job right, you won't even notice the editing. But if he's doing it wrong, it's all going to stick out like a sore thumb. The point I'm trying to make here is people are really black and white when it comes to whether or not a movie is bad. Especially if you have a gigantic fan base behind you.
In the case of Godzilla, they are not technically great movies, but you just have to give respect to the crew, director, designers, everyone who put their all into these special effects shots. Sure, a lot of the 60s era films got on the cheap side. Decisions such as relying on stock footage to save money lowered the quality of movies such as Godzilla vs. Gigan. However, dedication to the miniatures and sets led to the greatness of Godzilla Final Wars, Shin Godzilla, and the whole Heisei saga. The effects vary from era to era, which...
Okay, I should address this for those who are new to Godzilla, because you might not know this, but there are different eras to Godzilla, and I'm going to reference them a lot. From 1954 to 1975, that's the Showa era of Godzilla films. Then they took a little break, and there's the Heisei era. That goes from 1984 to 1995. Then they took another break until 1999 to 2004. That's the Millennium era, which is technically in the Heisei era, but you don't need to worry about that. And then everything else that's after that is in the Reiwa era, the names of which come from the reigns of the Japanese emperor in place at the time the films were made. From Emperor Hirohito, known as Showa, his son Akihito, aka Heisei, you get the idea. The reason we distinguish the Heisei era from the Millennium era is just to kind of make life easier for us. The Heisei era was its own series of films until rebooted in 1999 to start a new series. Alright, everybody got that? We're good? Alright, let's move on.
With each era, we get a special effects style that is reminiscent of the time it was made. The 60s Showa films are really cheesy, with goofier looking costumes straying away from the horror look of the very first film. The 90s Heisei films played up the sci-fi and action with more colorful beams, more sparks in the explosions, and ups the destruction. The Millennium is when CGI got involved, and in my opinion suffered. For the most part, the digital effects are used sparingly. However, the monsters, sets, puppets, and other effects are top-notch, notably Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. The main note for the Reiwa era of Godzilla in terms of special effects is Shin Godzilla, released in 2016. At the time of this video, is the only live-action Godzilla film in the Reiwa era that's made in Japan. The only other films included in the Reiwa era are the direct Netflix anime trilogy, which is just a different conversation. But Shin Godzilla kept some of the original traditions when making a Godzilla film, with having an animatronic puppet instead of someone in a suit. They also used this method partially in Return of Godzilla, known as Godzilla 1985 in the States. However, there is still a heavier use of CGI, but Shin Godzilla is smart with it. The same way Jurassic Park used CGI and animatronics to blend the effects together, Shin had a similar approach, and honestly, I can't blame them for transitioning to CGI.
I mean, Jesus, do you have any idea how hard it is to shoot miniatures? Well, I don't, but, I've heard other people talk about how hard it is. Shut up. What I am most impressed by is their resilience to moving to CGI. Ever since 1990-something, CGI has dominated the American film industry, being used in like every single blockbuster movie. And I want to be clear, you can do some amazing things with CGI, from the Lord of the Rings movies to Sin City. However, it's just a personal preference of mine. The special effects in a movie such as Avengers will never impress me as much as a movie like John Carpenter's The Thing. I just really appreciate the elbow grease put into the physical effects of these shots because it's not done by someone at a computer desk. And I know I oversimplify digital effects by saying things like that. It's just something of a preference of mine. I like seeing something that's physically in front of a camera instead of seeing something that's in a completely different plane of existence. And I guess this is the time to mention the Hollywood special effects.
They aren't bad, and I really appreciate that they use actual motion capture, especially in the faces. They are trying to keep everyone happy. General audiences prefer CG to practical, and hardcore fans of Godzilla like the human emotions in the monsters. It's just the natural progression of things. The original 1954 movie is not as impressive today, but keep in mind this is 66 years ago. At the time, this was a cinematic marvel. Before, monster movies were about human-sized monsters played by people in costumes, or giant-sized monsters that were done in stop motion. Godzilla's first film, Gojira, perfected an up-and-coming art form known as suitmation. Filming a guy in a costume from low angles, putting small objects in the foreground, and slowing down the footage really lent to the illusion of a giant monster ravaging Tokyo. It's a fun filmmaking idea that many have also used, from Gamera to the 1976 King Kong remake. And sure, a lot of Godzilla's films cut back on the realism a lot after the first one. In fact, immediately after the first one. But look at the suits they had to make. The landscapes, cities, and pyrotechnics. It's kind of impressive. Yeah, it's not realistic or totally convincing, but, it's fun. It's the same sort of enjoyment I get out of watching the frogs in Hell Comes to Frogtown.
The Godzilla films always pushed for better effects as time went on, and that in turn also led to how the characters of the monsters themselves would appear to you on screen. Which brings me to my next point. Now, we can't have a discussion video about giant monster movies without discussing the most important part, the creatures themselves. And now, the monsters' character depth doesn't go past anything, say, Drogon from Game of Thrones, but really we don't need anything more than that. Just understanding that Godzilla is a territorial dick and Mothra is a loving pacifist is all we need to know.
After the original Godzilla film made so much money for the studio, Toho wasn't sure where they wanted to go with it, so they started experimenting. Godzilla Raids Again was the first time they tried two monsters in the same movie. Here, the creatures are depicted as territorial animals battling out their natural instincts. Then they did one of the biggest crossovers ever and made King Kong vs. Godzilla. The third Godzilla film was a huge financial success due to the joining of two of the most popular movie monsters of all time. King Kong vs. Godzilla made over 400 million yen, or close to $4 million US dollars. For reference, Gojira made about $1.6 million, and the sequel made about $1.5 million. Kong vs. Godzilla made more than both the previous films combined. Therefore, mashups or versus movies became the trend. So there came Mothra vs. Godzilla, a crossover with another one of Toho's monsters. Big success. 2 billion yen was made for that film, and from there, the truck kept moving. This film was monumental in not only showcasing one of the most popular kaiju to show up alongside Godzilla, but also set the bar that Godzilla might do better when not alone. Then moving forward with the next popular Toho monster, Rodan, making his debut in a Godzilla film in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. This is the film where the monster mash was put in full swing. 3 monsters fighting one menacing one was a big deal. Having 4 monsters in one movie is a staple that would return in other Godzilla films such as Son of Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, and even more kaiju and Destroy All Monsters. But Three-Headed Monster is where we first see the monsters react more like people. Mothra convinces Godzilla and Rodan to help her fight Ghidorah by doing monster talk while her twin fairies translate for us. This was a turning point for Godzilla to give them more human-like personalities and a kind of character arc over the Showa era.
Not like levels of Walter White or anything like that, but it's there. And again, I'm not regarding these as great cinema. These are B movies. They are absolutely terrible, cheesy B movies, but I think they're a little bit better than the average B movie, which brings Godzilla to a different height for me. He's kind of an interesting enigma of how he can have excellent movies and also the worst movies I've ever seen. But when you have the monsters act more like people and actually have character traits, it just heightens a B movie going experience.
It eventually evolved into Godzilla becoming a child-loving protector of the Earth, kind of like a superhero. A few more movies go by and Toho took a sharp turn into making the series more child-friendly. Godzilla's Revenge, Godzilla vs. Hedorah, I think, and Son of Godzilla. They became all about having very generic morals like don't pollute, stand up to bullies, blah blah blah. The monsters would interact like bad theme park mascots who were trying to talk to each other about how much they hate their job. And the monsters had even more generic personalities, but it's kind of really funny. Dumb interactions like this while making for a terrible movie are irrefutably hilarious. Other examples can be Godzilla and his sidekick Anguirus speaking in English to each other in Godzilla vs. Gigan. And need we forget this infamous moment from Monster Zero? The Heisei era is when they try to make it a bit more adult and serious, but still having a light tone. Godzilla is seen as a gray area, more animal-like. He is a menace, but he so happens to fight all the monsters that threaten us. Then you have monsters like Batra, who is basically the anti-Mothra, one of the first times we see a more complex character conflict. Batra and Mothra are both guardians of the Earth, but have different methods of going about it. Mothra is more of creating intimidation to stop environmental threats and leaving violence as a last resort, while Batra goes straight to saying, alright, nuke the ants. Seeing this dynamic gets us more engaged in the monsters as characters and holds our attention better. You may say I'm digging a lot into that one, but shut up. Then you get more sinister characters like Space Godzilla and Destroya, who can only be described as mustache-twirling villains who want to eradicate the world, but they make up for it in their designs. Space Godzilla always has an evil grin and does actions that even Ghidorah hadn't attempted yet. Creating a giant crystal castle, kidnapping Godzilla's son, he's just an asshole. And everything great about Destroya comes from his design. In my opinion, one of the more overrated villains, but I can't deny he is still cool as hell. His character is more of a metaphor for the Oxygen Destroyer, the only weapon known to kill a Godzilla. Destroya is a creature created by the Oxygen Destroyer and is naturally one of Godzilla's greatest foes. For context, this was supposed to be the last Godzilla film where the King of the Monsters dies at the conclusion. Creating a personified version of Godzilla's greatest weakness is pure genius. Monsters in film are often metaphors for something we fear. Hell, Godzilla symbolized the atom bomb. So creating a monster to scare another monster is just a fascinating concept. The Millennium series of films is when it becomes less about the monster's personalities, but more about spectacle. Better effects, better battles, but the emotional weight of Godzilla is kinda gone, mostly because he is treated more as a villain than ever. This plays up the force of nature side of Godzilla as the humans try to figure out how to get rid of him. Whether it is summoning 3 guardian monsters, or building a robot around a Godzilla skeleton, or creating a device that shoots black holes. No, I'm not making this up. Godzilla is more anti than hero in these films, which can be done well.
Movies like Shin Godzilla and Gojira show Godzilla as the main antagonist, which is great. They are excellent movies, but it's not always as fun in my opinion. Not nearly as fun as seeing Godzilla be the most badass hero ever in a movie like Godzilla Final Wars. But hey, that's Godzilla for you. Different interpretations, incarnations, which brings me to my final point.
He has had 30 live-action Japanese films about him, 3 American films about him, with a 4th coming hopefully later next year, 3 Japanese-made anime films, an American-made kids show from the 70s, a kids cartoon show from the 2000s, and a few episodes from an Ultraman rip-off show. So with all this content that has come out, there has to be at least one thing with Godzilla's name on it you have to like. I mean, some are low-key remakes, but for the most part, you can get really unique experiences depending which movie you watch. Some of it comes from differences of technology, the society climate at the time, or experiments to see what you can do with Godzilla. He has been a villain, a hero, a force of nature, a plant, an environmentalist, a god. He has been hated, worshipped, killed, resurrected, He's been in time travel plots, political drama, horror, action, sci-fi, romance? Kinda. He's been overpowered, he's been way too weak, and he had one of the first cinematic universes in the history of film. I mean, like, just by pure chances, you have to like one of the movies, and hopefully I've sparked your interest enough to want to check it out. Or for those of you who are already huge fans, I hope I gave you a unique perspective. Godzilla is just evidence at how much a simple idea can create such a huge franchise spanning decades.
The fact that he is still loved and they are still to this day making movies about him 66 years later should be evidence enough that there's something here for everyone. I mean, I just love Godzilla so much. I gotta sing about it.
Purposeful grimace and a terrible sound, he pulls the spitting eye tension wires down. Helpless people on subway trains trained by guide as he looks in on them. He picks up a bus and he throws it back down as he waves through the village from the center of town. Oh no, they say he's got to go, go, go Godzilla. Oh no, there goes Tokyo, go, go Godzilla. Oh no, they say he's got to go, go, go Godzilla. Oh no, there goes Tokyo, go, go Godzilla. Oh no, they say he's got to go, go, go Godzilla. Oh no, there goes Tokyo, go, go Godzilla. History shows again and again how nature points out the folly of man. History shows again and again how nature points out the folly of man. History shows again and again how nature points out the folly of man. History shows again and again how nature points out the folly of man. History shows again and again how nature points out the folly of man. History shows again and again how nature points out the folly of man. History shows again and again how nature points out the folly of man. Godzilla. History shows again and